Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Ram Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. From Bhagavatam, Canto 6, verses 17 to 22. And we'll focus on verse 19. So we start reading first.
The sun illuminates both internally and externally, expanding its reach. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of God, expanding its form, maintains everything in creation, both internally and externally.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead, power, mortality, and fearlessness. He is transcendental to death and the primitive actions of the material world. O Narada Ramana, it is therefore difficult to measure the glory of the Supreme Person.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead is to be known as the supreme reservoir of all material opulences, by 1/4 of his energy, in which all the living entities exist. Deathlessness, fearlessness, and freedom from the anxieties of old age and disease exist in the kingdom of God, which is beyond the 3 higher planetary systems and beyond the material covering.
The spiritual world, which consists of 3 parts of the Lord's energy, is situated beyond this material world, and it is especially meant for those who will never be reborn. Others who are attached to family life, not strictly follow celibacy vows, must live within the 3 material worlds.
By his energies, the all-pervading personality of Godhead is thus comprehensively the master in the activities of controlling and in devotional service. He is the ultimate master of both nescience and factual knowledge of all situations.
From that personality of Godhead, all the universal forms and the universal qualities, all material elements, qualities, and senses are generated. Yet these elude from such material manifestations, like the sun, which is separate from its rays.
I was born from the abdominal lotus flower of Lord Mahavishnu, the great person. I had no ingredient for sacrificial performances, except the bodily limbs of the great personality of God.
For performing sacrificial ceremonies, one requires sacrificial ingredients such as flowers, leaves, and straw, along with their sacrificial altar and a suitable times of prayer.
So we go back to text 19. Read Sanskrit. Pareshu sarvabhutani pado vidu amritam shimam abhayam
Padeshu sarvabhutani Siddhi pado vidu Amritam shema Nodhai bodhasu
Adeshu sarvabhutani Shastiti padovidu
Siddhi pado vidu
Amshemam ayam
Amritam shema
ayurvasu
Nodhai bodhasu
Adeshu sarvabhutani
Padeshu sarvabhutani
Shema Padayam
Amritam shema Nodhai bodhasu
Padeshu sarvabhutani
Padeshu sarvabhutani
Sastiki padovidu
Siddhi pado vidu
Samsimam abhayam
Amritam shema
Sri Pradhanodayam Vadasu
Nodhai bodhasu
Adeshu sarvabhutani
Padeshu sarvabhutani
Shastiti padovidu
Siddhi pado vidu
Shama Abhayam
Amritam shema
Dai Murdesu
Nodhai bodhasu
Padeshu.
Padeshu
Sarva.
Sarva
Bhutani.
Bhutani
Living entities.
Living entities.
Pumsa.
Pumsa
The Supreme Person.
the Supreme Person
Sthitipada.
Sthitipada,
The reservoir of all material
The
opulence.
reservoir of all material
Vidu
You should know.
You should know
Amrita.
Amritam
deathlessness,
Shema.
Shema
All happiness. All anxiety of old age, diseases, etc.
all happiness free from anxiety, old age, disease, etc.
Abhayam.
Abhayam
Fearlessness.
Fearlessness
Sri Murtha.
Sri Murna
Beyond the three higher planetary systems.
Beyond the three higher planets
Adhai.
Adhai
Exists.
exists
Murthasu.
Murthasu
Beyond the material count.
beyond the material powers.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as the supreme reservoir of all material opulence. By the 1/4 of his energy in which all living entities exist. Deathlessness, fearlessness, and freedom from anxieties of old age and disease exist in the kingdom of God, which is beyond the three planetary systems and beyond material colors. Perfect. Out of the total manifestations of the Sandhini energy of the Lord, 1/4 is displayed in the material world, and 3/4 are displayed in the spiritual world. Lord's energy is divided into three component parts, namely Sandhini, Samvit, and Ladini. In other words, he is full of manifestation of existence, knowledge, and bliss. In the material world, such a sense of existence, knowledge, and pleasure is meagerly exhibited, and all living entities, who are minute parts and parcels of the Lord, are eligible to relish such consciousness of existence, knowledge, and bliss very minutely in the liberated stage, whereas in the conditioned state of material existence, they can hardly appreciate what is the factual existence, existential, cognizable, and pure happiness of the liberated souls who exist is in far greater numerical strength than those souls in the material world can factually experience the potency of the above-minded Samvit and Ladini energies of the Lord in the matter of deathlessness, fearlessness, and freedom from old age and disease.
In the material world, the planetary systems are arranged in three spheres called Triloka: Swarga, Martya, and Patala. All of them constitute only 1/4 of the total Sandhini energy. Beyond that is the spiritual sky, where the Vaikuntha planets exist, beyond the coverings of 7 material strata. In none of the Triloka planetary systems can one experience the status of immortality, full of knowledge and bliss. The planetary systems are called Sattvika planets because they provide facilities for a long duration of life and relative freedom from disease and old age, as well as a sense of fearlessness. The great sages and saints are promoted beyond the heavenly planets to Maharloka, but that is also not the place of complete fearlessness, because at the end of one kalpa, the Maharloka is annihilated. Inhabitants have to transport themselves to still higher planets. Even on these planets, no one is immune to death. There may be a comparative extension of life, expansion of knowledge, and sense of full bliss, but factual deathlessness, fearlessness, and freedom from old age, diseases, etc., are possible only beyond the material spheres of the coverings of the material sky. Such things are situated on the head, Adhai Murdha. I wanted to unpack this particular purport by looking at one Sanskrit word, and I promise I will not use more than 2 Sanskrit words. One Sanskrit word, and use metaphors and little research I've done for this class to think through what it means that the material existence is 1/4 of entire existence. Because if existence is unlimited, what does 1/4 even mean? How many of us had that question? So, I've become a mind reader. The first Sanskrit word of the day, and we play around with it. Martya. Martya. Have you heard of this word, Martya? It comes from the root mrit. And you see the word amrita? You see the word mrit in it? Mrit means 2 things. Mrit means earth. What? Earth. You heard something funny?
Yes, the timing is.
Someone coughed right when you said the word.
Oh,
Nobody heard the actual punchline.
okay.
Max is fine.
I thought that was sarcastic.
No. Nobody else.
Mrit means earth. Mrit also means dead. The stuff that's made of earth die. Confirmed. And as the Bible says, from dust we come, dust we return. Something that does not die is amrita. You see, a means non. So in Sanskrit, non-death is amrita or non-earth. The word, have you heard of the title Chaitanya Charita Amrita, the book? Chaitanya means our awareness, our consciousness. Charita means nature. And Amrita means deathless or immortality. So the nature of our consciousness when it experiences immortality means Chaitanya Charita Amrita. It also means the story of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it's a pun. Anything that is in this world dies. That's the nature of the world. anything that is not of the world doesn't die. That's the basic premise of what's going on in these verses and footnotes. Now, then the next claim of the Srimad Bhagavatam is stuff that dies is only about 1/4 of all that exists. And all that exists is limitless. And a few years back, when I was grappling with this section of the Bhagavatam, I came across some research that I was extremely relevant for what we are discussing today. How many of you have heard of the term the galactic habitable zone? GHZ.
Star Trek.
No, this is real scientific research published by Cambridge University Press, which says the concept that about 1/4 of the universe is habitable refers to the idea of the galactic habitable zone. Right? There is a researcher, Guillermo Gonzalez, in a book called The Astrophysics of Life. There's a chapter that talks about this. This book was published in 2005. If you want to get deeper into this question, get connected with the Bhaktivedanta Institute. There are people who think about this stuff all day long and talk to them. But essentially, here's what's going on. It is said that in this universe, there is something called stellar density. Stellar means stars. Right? Areas with fewer stars reduce the risk of life-extinguishing supernova explosions, number one. Number two, stars with higher metal content can have planets with a solid surface, which is considered essential for what we know as life. And then, being too close to the galactic center exposes planets to intense radiation and gravitational disturbance, while being too far limits the availability of heavy elements. So, in a sense, the habitable zone is a balance between these factors, believed to be conducive to the development and the sustainability of life. However, it is important to note that this concept is based on our current understanding of life, which is primarily DNA based. It is not in line with the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam has a much broader definition of life. We don't, for example, know whether viruses are life. How many of us fell sick sometimes this December? Sneeze, cough, cold. There was a virus. We couldn't see it. It took over our bodies. It created civilizations. It expanded into families. And it took on resources that you call your body to make sure their civilization exists. Except viruses don't work unless they are inside a body. They're just a DNA code. The moment they get into organic matter, they manifest this thing called life. Right? And scientists don't know, don't understand, don't quite explain whether viruses are life. There is in the Bhagavatam, this universe is teeming with life. Otherwise, so much space is wasted real estate. So, there has to be life, except because we are defining life in such narrow terms, we think, we're the only ones, and we are the most important, and the rest of it is just blank space. And the Bhagavatam tells us the opposite. It says, this whole thing is teeming with life. You're just a spectrum of life. So this section of the Bhagavatam says that what you call life in the material world is only about 1/4 of all that there is. And if you think about it, as I said, I'll use a little metaphor. I want to do a little thought experiment here. Think about it. What does a telescope and a microscope do? What does a telescope do? Telescope helps you see up close. What does it help you see up close? What do you see? Stuff that's far away. And a microscope? See small things. Small things Are they far away? Extremely close. They're both made of lenses. They're both instruments of seeing things, right? And I want to propose that our Shastras are like a telescope and a microscope at the same time. Because it helps us see what is very far away, what is very big, what is very cosmic. And then simultaneously, it helps us see what is very small, very minute, very close, and very immediate. Right? So Shastras have this unique ability to connect what is very close, our lives, what are we doing, are we here, what the heck is going on, with something that's very big, cosmic, and gigantic. Does that make sense? So that's what these passages are doing. It is situating us in the larger picture. Now, we don't usually think about galaxies when we're at our job. We don't think about stars and supernovas unless you're an astrophysicist or a astronomer or something. When you have to pay your taxes or you have to prepare your meals, the big questions don't enter our head. And when the big questions enter people's head, they are unable to do the small tasks. When the big questions enter our head, we call it an existential crisis. Right? We just can't like, why am I here? What's going on? And I can't deal with this. And that's when we start thinking about big things and philosophizing. But Shastras help us balance between those two by giving information. And what were the chances that something that was there in the Bible a few thousand years back, that 1/4 of all of this is actually habitable in terms of material life? Imagine run by a scientist who had no reference to the Bhagavatam. By their own research, they have come up with the idea that, hey, 1/4 of it is actually habitable. Just through logic, right? And the discovery that you've made so. So that, to me, says that even if you don't have full faith in the Bhagavatam, it is quite reasonable to give this book the benefit of our doubts. Am I clear, sir? The purport then further says that within this material realm, we do three things. We exist, we seek to know, and we look for happiness. Whether you are an amoeba, a monkey, a human, or an evolved being, call it a demigod you want, these three are the lowest common denominator of life. Right? So the biological denominator of life is deoxyribonucleic acid, if you ask any scientist. It's called DNA. DNA. So they boil life down to a certain kind of amino acid or protein. That protein that holds the key or the code to what we call life. However, the Vedic Bhagavatam Bhakti definition of life is: one, we want to continue to exist. Two, we want to keep knowing because we want to continue to exist. And because we want to know and want to continue to exist, there must be a purpose. And that purpose is we want happiness. And this purport says that these three things that we demonstrate is essentially a reflection, a minute spark of the same powers that is there in our Creator. In our Creator, this this idea or this basic premise to exist is called sandhini. Then wit means to know, like English word wit or witness or vid, video, videare in Latin means to see, to be, to cognize, to know. That's some wit. And lada, pleasure. So our need to be, to know, and to be happy is actually a minute reflection of the Lord's power of samvid, sandhini, samvid, and ladini. Except what's happening is our existence here and our ability to experience that is covered, it's very limited. Right? Imagine you're walking around 13th Avenue on a busy day with a lot of traffic, but your eyes are tight, have earplugs in, you have a bad allergy so you can't smell anything. And for some reason you're tongue tied as well, and your sense of touch is gone. Now try crossing the road. Will it work? In Calcutta, there are street signs that says opare not opore, which means if you are trying to cross the road without noticing, you either go to the other side, which is opare, or you go up opore. If you ride a bike without a helmet, opare not opore. You're taking a 50-50 chance with your life. But, as I said, imagine crossing the road with your senses dull. It becomes so much more difficult to do a simple thing like crossing a road. Similarly, when we are in the material world, we are embodied. We are in this body that limits our capabilities to be ourselves. And that's why they say that you work very hard, you can only push the needle a little bit. Right? At the end of the day, even the biggest contributions we make are actually going to put a very small dent in the world. And then a few years or a few decades after we die, at least most of us, we're actually quite insignificant. And this verse, this purport, shows us our place. The final thing I want to say is, right from the Rig Veda, our Vedic literatures teach in a way that is very different from the kind of education we are used to and we receive in our schools. When we grow up, poetry and mathematics are separate subjects, right? Right? Do you ever mix poetry and math in school? But the very first lesson in the Vedic knowledge system is a blend of poetry and mathematics. Three things are taught at the same time. And there is an ancient way of counting on your fingers. And you want to try with experiment here? Try with experiment here. So this is how they count. You take your ring finger, you put the thumb in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you know why they count that way? It creates a spiral on your fingers.
Fibonacci.
It creates a spiral on your fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You touch the middle parts between the marks, and you go like that. You see, you just created a spiral on your finger. This spiral on the finger is also
expressed in the form of a poetic meter. You know what a poetic meter is? Like an iambic pentameter, right? I wandered lonely as a cloud. So every poem has a certain rhythm to it, and the rhythm is based on a certain set of numbers or numerical patterns, right? And so there is a rhythm, a pattern, a meter in the Vedas. There are several meters in the Vedas. The first meter of the Vedas is called Gayatri, right? And the Gayatri and the way it is counted follows the pattern of a spiral. And you look around you, go to YouTube, check out spirals in nature. You'll notice from the smallest things like snails to the fist of your hand, like let's make a fist like this. Do you notice a spiral there? To the shape of galaxies in the sky, you have a spiral. And you know what the spiral is called in Sanskrit? The Sudarshan Chakra. And if you think about it, that spiral is the fingerprint of God. Right there. And for this reason, ancient teachers of Sanatana Dharma picked up this little ammonite fossil from a very specific place called the Kalugata. They said, this is Vishnu. As in temples, you worship something called a Shalagram Shiva. It shows a chakra, a spiral, a wheel that you find across nature. That's the lowest common denominator. And so this stuff that we are studying, in a sense, speaks of a reality that our current science is too narrow to encompass. Sometimes it can be overwhelming, but if we give it a chance, you will realize that the stuff that we are handling here is actually quite brilliant. The second Sanskrit word of the day is, what was the first? Myth. The second is Brahman. Brah, I know it's not an English word, means to expand, to grow. Right? And just look around you, look at your own body. Have you grown? B-R-A-H. Brah. Huh? Brah. B-R-A-H. Brah. Brih means to expand. Brihat means big. Brahman means something that is ever growing, all encompassing, the basis of everything. And this is how Brahman is explained. You ready for the last thought experiment of the day? How many of you have heard of this sequence of numbers called Fibonacci series? But I want to pause and bracket that and ask you another question. How many of you know or think about or have wrapped your brain on the question, does infinity exist? Okay. Awesome. But think about this question. Like people ask, does God exist? Right? And they keep debating about it. A great way to address the question, does God exist? Or does anything beyond what we can perceive exist? To ask this question, does infinity exist? One second. And if you look at the sequence of numbers called the Fibonacci series, you come across a certain idea or a certain proof that infinity does exist. Fibonacci series works like this. You take any number, pick it like 0. You add 0 to 0, right? Continue doing the 0. Infinity. Well, then you take 1, which is 1 more than 0. And you add 1 to 0, you get 1. You add, the next number is 2, so you add 2 plus 1, you get
3.
Then you add 3 plus 2, you get
5.
5 plus 3, you get
8.
And you can keep doing that infinity. And that shows a possibility that, hey, there is something called infinity that can exist if you just keep adding numbers. By the way, when you represent these series of numbers in little boxes and try to depict it visually, could you look it up?
Fibonacci.
Yeah. Fibonacci spiral.
Fibonacci ratio.
He's a visual artist, he'll know better than I will. Look at that. The series of Fibonacci numbers, when arranged in ratio based on the space they take, show a spiral that is ever expanding.
Mhm.
Right there, my friends, is the sign of Brahman. You see what's going on here?
Infinity.
Yeah, right there. How many people in Gainesville get to discuss this deep stuff early in the morning? Before breakfast.
Without coffee.
Without coffee. But you see what's happening?
And Krispy Kreme.
But you see what's happening? Yes. I'll stop here and we'll open it for Q&A.
If you like zoomed in like super close, it would look the same if zoomed out.
Exactly. If you zoom in super close at the microscopic level, you see the same spirals. You zoom out at the major macroscopic level, you see the same spirals. Whether you're looking at reality from your metaphorical microscope or the metaphorical telescope, you see the same patterns. Right? Infinity exists, Brahman exists, Mrit exists. The stuff that we have is about 1/4 of all that exists. And that stuff is right here in this book. Isn't that amazing? Yes.
So would the universe be considered infinity, or is it just like
Well, from this version, we don't have a universe. We have multiverses. We tend to think beyond the confines of this one bubble. Because we are inside this bubble, and this bubble is already too big for us. Right? The problem, my friend, is while we are on a tiny speck of of dirt inside this bubble, we think no end of ourselves. Right? And because of that, what happens is we have death, fear, and anxiety. The moment we are able to come to a state of mind, which is Trinad Api Suniche, smaller than a blade of grass, we mentally become someone that's really small, really tiny, really who we are. Then you begin to experience what this translation says: deathlessness, fearlessness, and freedom from the anxieties of old age. Right? And if you think about what Elon Musk is doing, for example, he's trying to back up humanity, or at least a version of it, on planet Mars, spending millions and billions of dollars of our Earth's resources. Right? Why? Because this is such a wonderful thing. You don't back it up. Anything happens here, you're gonna get lost. So if you back up your files, you might as well back up humanity. Right? But the problems are not solved. As I said this first, in that very assumption is the idea that the current version of humanity is at its peak. That we have nowhere to go after this. Right? And it is that, I think that whole philosophy of going to Mars is a philosophy of human pessimism. That without solving the problems right here on this planet, we're trying to, get into a far-fetched dream. Our Shastras say another person, give the example of another person who tried doing that, and that was Ravana. Right? Ravana tried to build a staircase all the way to our planet, so because this place wasn't good enough. Dude, we're here for a very short time. About 70 years. Just out of millions of years that this thing is going to exist. Right? And if we try, if we behave in a way where we are trying to be permanent in this physical body, ignoring all of the signals that nature is giving us, right? There's something seriously wrong with our thinking. And again, Srimad Bhagavatam is the book, I'd say, that is a corrective medicine for this intellectual dystopia that we have created for ourselves. Yes, sir. Thanks behind it.
Couldn't someone make the argument that there is no infinity, the numbers just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and at a certain point, you're not able to quantify it?
That's precisely what points to infinity. And if you look at the sign, the symbol for infinity, you've seen that? Like this loop. You know why that particular symbol for infinity? Because if you map the movement of the sun throughout the year in the sky, at a particular time or a particular place, you will see the sun moves in that loop. Right? And how many number of times would the sun move in that loop? Nobody knows. It's just ever expanding. At least from our vantage point.
It's like as each unit of electricity is generated, each unit as a whole becomes less and less expensive. So the per unit, so the more electricity that's built or generated, the cheaper it gets. Just keep going.
Yeah, and the core idea behind it is everything is ever expanding, right? Ever expanding. And if you look at the basis of life, our bodies, our knowledge, the stuff we do on planet Earth, even the universe, the idea that there is a Big Bang, and I want to premise that by saying it's a theory, it's not something proven. It's a Big Bang theory. The premise of Big Bang is that the universe is expanding. The basic idea. Right? So the idea of expansion is embedded in the second Sanskrit word of the day, one. People in ancient India knew that everything is ever expanding, and that's the substratum, the basis on which everything is built, and that is a living conscious force, Amrita. Right. We have 6 more minutes. Any more questions? Questions, comments, thoughts, ideas? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Earlier in the class, you were talking about which is the galactic inhabitable zone.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, and the telescope and microscope, how seems like there's a conundrum in understanding that both aspects of micro and macro are infinite or unlimited. How would you, comment on that?
Well, first of all, the micro and the macro can be understood from the meso level, right? We have to posit ourselves. That's why I also mentioned that at the end of the day, we are looking at Shastra that fulfills the role of both a telescope and microscope. That it is, usually, first of all, these two are seen in isolation of one another. The two. But Shastra brings it together. Number one. And number two, even at the micro level, things are ever expanding. And many years back, more than a decade, a scientist from the University of Chicago and I taught a course called Reality 101, Hindu and Quantum Perspectives. And we didn't have a agenda in that course to show that they're saying the same things. We just asked questions that are common to both fields of knowledge. And we said these are two very different human fields of knowledge with two very different methodologies. but a similar set of questions that are common to both. And here are the answers. And so the scientist who taught gave the scientific answers, and I gave the Vedantic answers, and we let the audience decide, you know, how they wanted to draw their conclusions. And we went from the micro to the macro. And one of the things that confounds scientists even today is the laws of Newtonian physics, like motion, gravity, so on and so forth, stops existing at a quantum level. Now, nobody really understands quantum phenomena. Right? It's very, it's inconceivable in a sense.
Mysterious.
Very. But it has been scientifically recorded that, say when two particles are entangled on a quantum level, and you spin, say you take these two particles and you put one in Calcutta and one in Chicago. You spin the particle in Calcutta clockwise. The particle in Chicago starts spinning at the same time anti-clockwise, without any lagging time.
Strained?
Huh?
Will be strained?
No, they are separate. So space, as we understand it, doesn't exist on that level. And in our world, nothing exceeds the speed of light. I'm getting too esoteric here, but I want to kind of boil it down and say that, speed of light that we've observed is the fastest thing that we have in the universe, in our observed universe. And because nothing breaks the speed of light, we have this thing called causality, that I am my daughter's father. Right? There is a sequence to things. When we say this star is 3 billion light years away, it took 3 billion years for the light to travel from there to planet. We can measure that. However, at the quantum level, you see information is getting transferred between these two particles as if space doesn't exist. So if you look at this paper, say, the right side of the paper, or your left side, is Gainesville, and your right side is Vrindavan, right? Now, for anything to travel between Gainesville to Vrindavan will take time. That's how matter works. Except at the quantum level, you make one ripple in space, and you suddenly have two holes.
What's it called? Interstellar?
It's the basic premise of quantum entanglement. Right? And so at the very microscopic level, stuff that we see doesn't really exist the way we see it. And here's another very simple exercise. The chairs we are sitting on seem pretty solid. Our bodies feel pretty solid. If you go by the scientific explanation, we are mostly based on hydrocarbons, hydrogen atoms and carbon atoms, and these atoms are 99% empty space. So technically speaking, we have 99% empty space, sitting on 99% empty space. But we don't experience it that way. The thing that makes the difference is the Paramatma. Right? That makes reality substantive. Right? And this reality is constantly expanding. Yeah.
If something's a solid versus if it's a liquid or a gas, when are the particles moving most quickly? Slow.
So in solid, the particles are moving the most slowly. In gases, they are moving the most quickly. But we're talking not just at the level of particles, but at the level of atoms, which are much, much smaller. Right? So there's only, the atoms that we see in the periodic table. And even then, the electrons, first of all, nobody's seen an atom, right? And you just have pictures of what it might look like. You can only see the stuff on a spectrum when you put it on a screen. But once you get on that level, technically, atom is energy, and the basic equation that Einstein became famous for, E is equal to mc squared, it shows that energy and matter are actually replaceable. That the matter is very condensed form of energy. You can release energy from matter. That became the basis of the hydrogen bomb. Right? But it's 8:30. I want to stop here. Any last comment, question, idea? Yes.
Just a quick one. Oh, sorry. Was there someone
We'll
else?
take two.
Okay, just mine's really quick.
Yeah, mine.
Oh, you were saying about, the Rig Veda starting with numbers and parts, so poetry.
Got it.
Yeah, and the spiral that we saw is actually called the golden ratio in photography.
Yeah.
So it's something they use in art
Hmm.
to compose pictures. So they use the rule of thirds and the golden ratio. So it translates over even into the modern world,
Absolutely.
arts and numbers
Absolutely.
being put together.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so the Gayatri is poetry, a number, and a visual put together. That's why I said it's very interdisciplinary. But
Yeah.
thank you for making it. Yes.
Thank you for that stimulating class. Just as there's no distance between molecules or entities on the quantum level, there's no distance between Krishna and the soft-hearted desires of the devotee. In Mayapur, years ago, there was some contention building the temple in Sri Mayapur Chandradhari Mandir. The altar is so far from the asana. So there was some big debate. Maybe Srila Prabhupada, we should move your asana closer, so that your vision is not interrupted. And he just stopped the argument. He said, at no stage is there any question of distance between myself and Krishna.
Oh, that's
Architecture.
beautiful. And you're the first one to translate a metaphor from quantum mechanics into poetry. But thank you for that. Thank you so much. Mahaprasade Govinde.
Spiritual purpose. Srila Buddha, Sri Krishna, Jai.